Hey guys, welcome back to another Happy Chuck programming video. Today is part 3 of the Unity Ragdoll series. In this part I will be covering how to add WASD movement for your Ragdoll. So by the end of this video, you will be able to move your Ragdoll forward, backward, left, right, and you will also be able to jump. So let's get started. So before we get started on actually creating the player controller, I need to do two things. The first thing we need to do is add some drag to all of our limbs, and what this will do is basically keep the limbs more stable and make them a bit more slow. This is kind of optional, so if you don't want it, you don't need to. If you want your ragdoll to be more free and more jiggly, I guess, then you can keep it at the default values, which are 0, and for the angular drag it's 0.05. But for me, I'm just gonna set these two at 1. I found that this is a good amount for my model and for my needs, but you can experiment with it, and yeah. And this will be for all of the limbs, so you can just select all of them and set it to 1 and 1. Alright, the next thing we're gonna do is create a physics material for both of our feet. This will allow it to slide more easily when we make the movement script. So go to your materials folder and you can just right click anywhere, create a physics material right here, and I'm just gonna call it slide. And for the dynamic friction, I'm gonna set it to 0.2, and as well for the static friction, bounciness will be 1, and the friction combined will be minimum, and so will the bounce be. And then we're just gonna select our left foot and our right foot and add this slide to the spear colliders. Alrighty, so now let's get started on our player controller script. To do this, I'm first gonna create a folder in our assets called scripts, and because it's always good to stay organized, or else you'll get very lost while searching for assets. In our scripts folder, I'm gonna create a new C# script called player controller, and once it compiles, I will run it in Visual Studio. Okay, so now that Visual Studio is loaded, I will delete the update function, and I will delete this text here. And the first thing I'm gonna do is make some variables. So we're gonna need speed, so public float speed, and we need strafe speed, so public float strafe speed. Let me just exit real quick. So speed will be our forward and back speed, and our strafe speed will be our left and right speed. So whenever we move left and right, the speed will be less than if we were moving forward or backwards. The next thing we need is the jump force, because I will be teaching you how to make a ragdoll jump. So public float jump force. The other thing we need is a reference to our rigid body that's in our hips, and we also need a bool is grounded. This is grounded bool will help out when we're jumping, because when we jump, this will be false so that we can't jump again, and then once we hit the ground, it will turn into true again so that we can jump. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is initialize our hips reference. So in our start function, I'll just do hips equals get component rigid body hips. So what we're doing right here is that since we're gonna be adding our player controller script to the hips in our editor, in our hierarchy, right here, then the get component function will get this rigid body in right here. Okay, so the next step is to make a fixed update function, and this is just a pre-built function. And the reason why we're using fixed update instead of normal update is that we're gonna be doing some physics changes. So we're gonna be adding force to our hips, and whenever we make physics changes, then we want to use the fixed update function because it's better. but if you're not using physics, then use the normal update. So in our fixed update, we want to do if input. So we're grabbing our input from the controller or keyboard, but in my case I'm using a keyboard. So input.getKey key code W, and you always want the key code dot before whatever key you're using on the keyboard. And as you can see, there's so many keys that you can use from, so yeah, you can use any controls you want, but I'll just be using WASD today. So if input.getKey key code W, then we want to add a forwards force to our hips. So hips.add force, and remember hips is a rigid body, so we can add force to that rigid body. So hips.add force, and we want to go forward, right? So we're gonna do hips.transform. So this transform is gonna grab the transform of the game object hips, and the way it's doing that is it's grabbing the transform that this script is attached to. So hips.transform forward, and this is just the forward vector of our transform. So that means even if we're looking to the left, then our forward vector will always be the same. Alright, so since we want to go forward, we need to increase the magnitude of this vector. So we're just going to multiply it by speed, and that should be good. So whenever we click the W button, the ragdoll will start walking. But I don't think this is good enough. I also want the ragdoll to run. And I want the ragdoll to run whenever we hold W and left shift at the same time. So to do this, inside our if statement, we're going to make another if statement called input.getKey key code left shift. So the same thing before, but it's inside the other if statement and it's using left shift instead. And I'm just gonna copy this, add it here, and just multiply this vector by another 1.5. And we'll put an else. So if we're not doing the left shift key, then we're just gonna walk normally. Alright. Alright, so now if I save this script and if I go back to Unity, if I click, actually we can't click play yet because you have to remember we haven't even added the script to our hips yet. Okay, so we added the script by dragging it, and for the speed I'm gonna set it at 150. For the strafe speed I'm gonna set it at 100, and for the hips I'll just drag in the rigid body like that. The jump force will initialize later because we haven't even made the jump script yet. So if we click play now, and let me just go back here in the scene view. Also remember that you have to have the game selected for your input to work. So now if we hold the W key, then as you can see, the rigid body is now moving forward. And also if we hold the W key while holding left shift, it goes faster. Okay, so that is our forward button, but we also want to add the A, S, and D because I mean, like, you kind of need to. You can't just go forward all the time, that's boring. So let's go back to our player script and let's add all the other keys. And on my other monitor I'm just gonna drag in this code because it will be a lot faster. So we're doing the same thing, but for A and D keys, which is our left and right. So take a look here. So input.get key code.A, which is left, hips.add force, negative make sure you have the negative right there. hips.transform.right. So not forward but right, because that returns the red axis of the transform, which is left and right. But since it's already on positive, so that means right, then we need to make it negative by adding the negative here, which will turn this into a left. And then I'm multiplying that by the strafe speed. And yeah, for the D key, the same thing but without the negative operator, because it's already on hips.transform.right, and D obviously is the right key. And then the backward key, hips.add force negative forward, which means it's backwards, times speed. There we go. And that's how you go WASD. So if I save it and go back to my Unity script, my Unity editor, click play, and let me just go back here. I can move forward, I can move right, I can move left, and I can move backwards. I can also sprint forward. And yeah, our WASD movement seems to be working. We can also go diagonal, so that's nice. And yeah, that's how you do WASD movement. But I'm not gonna leave you off right there yet, because I haven't taught you how to make your ragdoll jump. So that's the last thing we need to do. And the way we're gonna do that, go to your player controller script. If input get axis jump, we're gonna get the jump axis, which is right here, and basically the button is space. So whenever we click space, then our ragdoll should jump. So if input.get axis jump is more than 0, because this is a float, so -1 to 1. And the reason it is like this is that whenever you have a controller to play with, then since you have joysticks, there's more precision, and that's why we have a get axis. But you can also do the other way, which is get key and then key code spacebar. So after this, we want to check if our ragdoll is grounded. So if is grounded, then hips.add force new vector 3 0 comma jump force in the Y, and then 0 for the Z. And then obviously, since it will be jumping, we need to set the is grounded to false. Right, so that's how you jump. But we're not done yet, because what happens when we jump, then we fall back down? Where's the script that will say, that will determine if a ragdoll is on the ground or not? And to do this, I want you to keep a note that this is grounded is public. So that means we can access this variable with any other script as long as we have a reference to this player controller that's attached to the hips. Alright, so what we're gonna do is go to your Unity editor. We're gonna make a new script, and I'm just gonna call it limb collision. And in our limb collision script, it's very simple. Just do public player controller. So we're getting a reference to the player controller that we will attach to the hips, that we have attached to the hips, sorry. And player controller equals game object dot find object of type player controller. So it's gonna search through the hierarchy and find the object that has a player controller inside of it. And then obviously we need to access the actual player controller from it. So get component player controller, and bam, Next. So now that we have the player controller, now we just need to add an on collision enter, and whenever this script detects collision, then the player controller is grounded will equal true. Now the reason why we call this limb collision is because we're gonna assign this script to every single limb in a ragdoll, and that will allow it so that even if we fall on our head, it will still say that the ragdoll is grounded. So just basically select everything in your ragdoll and drag this over, and then spacebar. Yay! It didn't work. Alright, what happened? I think the problem is probably because I should probably add a force, and the force I'm gonna use is 6,000, and there we go, it's jumping. Alright, so yeah guys, that's basically our player controller script, and thank you if you came all this way, and thanks for watching. Subscribe if you like this tutorial, and yeah, bye.